kila Jumatatu hadi
Welcome back to Daybreak. This morning, the conversation is centering on the climate change debate. As we know that the 27th Climate Change Conference of Parties is currently underway in Egypt, and we are discussing some of the pertinent issues that should be discussed in this particular meeting. And in studio, I'm having a sit down with Esther Mwiruri, a Programs Officer, Climate Change and Adaptation at the Kenya Red Cross, and also we are linking up with two experts from Egypt, Dr. Kinyanjui Koimburi and Dr. Mithika Mwenda, climate change experts as well. But as we pick up this conversation, Esther, earlier we were talking about the loss and damage. I heard, a few days ago, in fact, it has been a big story that African countries were really excited that loss and damage was even part of the agenda to begin with. Why is this a big deal? And also, when we're talking about damage, what are we looking at essentially?
Yeah, like I had mentioned earlier, it's a big deal because there are communities that are beyond their adaptation window and mitigation window, and they need to be supported to cope with the shocks of climate change. Currently, we are talking about farmers experiencing loss of more than 2.5 livestock dying. That's a huge loss. When you talk about damage, again, these are some of the key questions that will come in place when, if there will be agreed to set up a loss and damage facility. Some of the questions that need to be addressed will be, what do we define as loss and damage? Is it infrastructure? Is it human loss? Is it livestock? Is it asset? What about the cultural assets of a community? So those are some of the pertinent questions, or rather hurdles that need to be crossed once this conference is able to deliver loss and damage facility. And again, it is really important because as we have mentioned, and as we can see here in Kenya, people are already facing greater scales of the climate impact, and they need to be supported. So defining who needs that support, how that support gets to them, is it going to be timely, and how can we ensure that, again, we don't set a facility that will take too long to be effective, or too long to get to the people that need it most. Again, the other questions around the facility will be, are we going to set it as grant or as loans? Because if they're going to set it as loans, again, you're going to add a more burden to the poor countries and to the most vulnerable people who actually need support in that. So this is really an important outcome, if it's going to be a good outcome from this conference, because it will mean that there will be more resources to support early recovery for communities that are affected by drought, for example, by flash floods or flooding events, which have very devastating impacts both in the infrastructural and both on life and livelihoods. We know that there's a direct link between disasters and bringing back or bringing behind the development gains that countries have been able to put in place. And for developing nations and the most vulnerable, who are the most vulnerable actually, it is a great relief if they can be able to know that instead of diverting our development and our normal programming resources towards responding to climate-related impacts, we can be able to access this fund to be able to offer the immediate support and long-term recovery for these communities that have been affected. So it's a really important topic, and it's a good thing that for the first time it has been placed on the agenda. All
right. And we'll come back to you in just a bit. I understand we now have Dr. Kinyanjui Koimburi online just to get his insights as well. He's coming to us live from Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Dr. Yaved, good morning. Good to see you. I just want to hear from you. So far, the few days that you have been there, what is it that you have gathered that gives Africa and specifically Kenya hope? What are the gains so far?
Thank you so much from the studio. And let me just give you a grim statistics of what we have. There's an assembly of over 130 leaders, world leaders, and also we have over 30,000 delegates that is converging at this venue. So what that means is that there seems that there is a world awakening in terms of climate change and trying to understand what climate change means. In fact, there's one statement that was said by the UN Secretary, that is Antonio Guterres, where he said that if we don't change the path we are following, we are heading towards climate hell. So what I'm saying is that African nations, first of all, the discussion is about the African nations, and that's why COP27 is very important, as opposed to all the other COP meetings, because this generally is talking about Africa and what it entails in terms of adaptation and mitigation when it pertains to Africa. So we're looking forward to it. And also I'm happy to report that the president, that is His Excellency William Ruto, was able to meet a few leaders. And one of the leaders that he met was also the Prime Minister of UK, that is if I can't get the right name, that is Rishi. And Rishi has deep roots both in UK and in Kenya. Remember the parents of Rishi, the father was born in Kenya, the mother was brought up in Tanzania. So they have deep roots, be it in Kenya and Tanzania. And that's why maybe it went the long way of the Prime Minister investing over 500 billion that is Kenya shillings, into adaptation mitigation for the works within Kenya. So what I'm saying is that we are seeing the African nations coming in to get investment and to make sure that we get investment on that. And maybe as we move on, I'll be able to highlight the Prime Minister was also here. The former Prime Minister, that is His Excellency Raila Amolo Odinga, was here, where he was able to attend an energy meeting. He was able to speak on that, and we had the privilege of meeting both leaders. So what I'm saying is that the leaders who are coming here, they are climate conscious, and their main business is to ensure that Kenya and Africa at large gets the money needed that we need for climate proofing. Remember that the President of Kenya, His Excellency William Ruto, is the coordinator within the Committee of the African States and Government on Climate Change. So he's within that committee, and this is his sole mandate to ensure that he pitches best for investors to come and invest in Kenya. Back to you in the studio.
All right, Daktari, I know that one of the biggest issues that are being discussed at this particular conference touch on climate change financing, and no wonder loss and damage made it to the agenda in the first place, which African countries have really celebrated. I just want you to talk to me about the gaps in terms of financing. What loopholes have you identified, and how do you seek to see that they are sealed? What is your demand as African countries on the table during this conference when it comes to financing?
Yes, I hope I got the question clear, but the issue of climate financing has been something of a big contention, especially when you look at the 100 billion US dollars per year that has been, that was initially supposed to be within the Green Climate Fund, which was agreed upon from COP21, that each country, the developed nations, will actually be contributing that money so that they pay the African nations. Remember that this is part of that climate financing so that we can access it. So the clarion call that the African nations are calling upon is, how can we make this accessible? How can we make the accessing of this climate finance money more accessible, and reducing all these loopholes and policies that African nations are seeing these loopholes as challenges in terms of how can they access this money without all these loopholes? So it has become a challenge for African nations to access this money, because to them they are seeing the aspect of monitoring and evaluation being a huge hindrance. But what we are saying is that they are trying to see how best they can be able to make accessing of this money easy to African nations, and maybe they're educating even the African nations more on how they can be able to write bankable proposals and projects which can be pitched to the World Bank for them to actually finance it. And also something I need to reiterate on this is that when it comes to this climate financing, especially the 100 billion kitty that that developed nations have said they will be putting into the Green Climate Fund, it has not been coming to fruition. This money has not been coming in. And remember, it is one way of them paying us. Because we said, they're telling us to move away from fossil fuel, to stop using coal and the rest. And remember, these developed nations, they developed because of using coal. So we are telling them, if you don't want African nations to use coal and other fossil-based fuels, please pay us for the amount of space you had actually destroyed through pollution all over these years. So this is a journey we're looking at in terms of climate finance, and our hope is that they'll be able to fulfill the pledges for us to access the $100 billion US per year since then. Back to you, studio.
All right, Dr. just another question. You know, that has been the hope over time, over the years. Developing countries have been hoping that the developed nations will meet this obligation, but the goalpost has been shifting. And if you look at trends, they have not been able to meet that particular target. I'm looking at the future also, considering the economic crisis that has, crippled the entire globe. And I'm asking myself, what are some of the innovative ways that African countries can then begin to come out of this without having to rely on I know it's crucial, but without having to rely on that particular fund? Are there opportunities that perhaps we can tap?
Yes, if I got you right on that question, is that there are the opportunities that we can be able to tap in terms of actually ensuring that we get the needed financial aid in terms of climate proofing ourselves. So maybe let me talk about the green jobs that are out there, which has been reiterated. Remember South Africa, first of all, in Africa, South Africa is leading in the use of coal. And South Africa has been put on the table where they're actually being urged to move to clean energy. Remember South Africa, they put the clarion call some days back here at COP. They were saying over 93,000 people in South Africa depend directly on the coal industry. That is the workers and the rest. So they're telling the developed nations that if you tell us to move away from the use of coal, where will we take the 93,000 people? So they're being told that, in fact, the revolution or the moving into the green renewable energy space, it will create more jobs for these 93,000 workers they have. But also on the same page, remember that Kenya is on the limelight positively, putting in mind that 93% of the electric grid or energy being generated in Kenya is green energy. Remember, we have the geothermal power plant in Nakuru. Also, we are harnessing solar energy. We are harnessing wind in Turkana. So Kenya has been put in a positive limelight. And that's why, in fact, the president was able to attend three very important meetings. There is one meeting he attended on water. There's one meeting he attended on adaptation and mitigation. And also there's another meeting he attended on carbon markets, of which we're going to discuss further on what this carbon market entails. But what I can say is that there is money outside there, but we as African nations, we need to streamline ourselves strategically so that when this money now comes, we have all the tools and the policies in check. Now it goes back to the legislatures in the parliament to ensure they have laws and policies ready so that when this money comes in, we can implement what is within the nationally determined contribution. That is the NDCs. Back to you.
All right, Dr. For us to, make any progress with this, we know that adaptation to climate change is something that governments alone cannot achieve. If you look at other key stakeholders, who are you looking at and what is your call to them? Who must do what so that we all work together to a successful journey on this?
Yeah, okay, there's a lag in sound, but no problem. When it comes to the stakeholders that we have playing a huge role, especially here that we have from African nations and the rest, I have been able to interact with a few stakeholders who are actually within this industry or this space of climate change and energy. There are so many in terms of NGOs. They are here, UNEP is there, UNDP is there, and other private organizations that are actually mandated in this space of energy, the space of, in fact, there's this huge discussion on e-mobility. And we are hoping that Kenya will be able to ramp up its efforts on the BRT system. So this one, the buck now goes back to the Minister of the Minister of Transport to look into how we can be able to reactivate the BRT system, because this is one way of us cutting our carbon emissions. We can see our close allies and friends, Tanzania, Rwanda, they have actually put up good systems of BRT, because when it comes to Nairobi and other major cities in Kenya, we have seen that congestion and traffic is a big problem. But if we are able to correct this in a much more organized manner, because poor urban planning is the other issue. But now we have to take advantage of that, create more non-motorized pathways where people can walk to work, people can cycle to work. And maybe people are asking back home, what can I do at my personal level? Because we have all these other stakeholders who are scientists and the rest. You at home, whether you're a scientist or not, you can participate either by ensuring that you turn off your lights, ensuring that you use energy-saving GECOs, energy-saving light bulbs in your own space. You don't use running water so that you can save the demand on water. So all these are things that you can do at your personal level. And I think as we progress, we'll be able even to touch more on what the investors here, they're talking about in terms of making sure that Kenya and the Horn of Africa is safe from drought that we're experiencing right now. Back to you.
All right, Daktari, thank you for your insights on this. And just also to bring in Esther into the conversation, remember we'll also be linking up with Dr. Mithika Mwenda shortly. Esther, you've had, very important points there coming from Daktari in Egypt, just discussing, the loss and damage funding and the issue of, why we seem not to be making any headway when it comes to climate financing. But again, I just want to hear your thoughts as well on what you think are the urgent actions that then we must take to be able to achieve something. Who are the important people that should be brought on board? What should they do? Because the reason I'm asking this question, somebody is watching and they feel like this climate change debate is too far away from me as a person. Bring that person into this conversation. What must they do to make this a success?
Yeah, so climate crisis or climate change is everyone's business, and everyone has a role to play. Governments have a role to play by providing enabling environment, being able to climate-proof their development and infrastructure project, and setting national goals that are leading us towards low carbon emission economy. At individual level, we do have organizations like Kenya Red Cross who are also at the front line of supporting communities to adapt to the changing climate. And one of the things that we've been doing is working with the most vulnerable communities, for example, farmers, to help them adopt technologies that help them better use water resources that they have, be able to adopt different crop varieties that are able to survive within the different climate that we are experiencing today, so that in continuously educating and creating awareness around the changing environment and what that means to their livelihoods, but also increasing access to climate information services. It's one of the things that we have been working very closely with the Kenya Meteorological Department by ensuring that the climate information is not only available for institutions like KMD and Kenya Red Cross, for example, because it is more effective if a farmer knows how this season is going to look and how it is going to affect my produce. So ensuring that we are able to also incorporate traditional knowledge on climate prediction to the scientific knowledge is one of the huge impact that we have also seen in increasing the uptake of early action. But also from what Daktari has also mentioned is the fact that at the household level we have and at a personal level we have responsibilities to take. For example, ensuring that we are not using single-use plastic. For example, we are reducing on the plastic waste within the planet, and we know what plastic waste is doing to the whole climate crisis issue. But also taking up simple initiatives like planting trees and ensuring that you're able to follow up and take care of that tree until it matures, ensuring that we are also adapting to much more greener and sustainable approaches throughout our daily activities, by ensuring that we are more sensitive to climate and environment. I see a lot of people, they feel like, oh, this climate is something that is far too from myself. Yeah, but you see, every day we are driving ourselves back to the office and back, or to the places where we have businesses. But if we were to use public transport, for example, it has a huge impact on the carbon emissions, because we know one of the biggest emitters is the transport industry. But if you're able to combine the individual efforts with the national goals and visions, for example, on introducing the BRT system and a much more efficient public system, people will stop using personal cars more to work and doing other businesses. So it is really combining both individual actions, but also looking at what are the national goals, what is the world heading towards, and being able to combine all these factors together. I think those are some of the quick wins that we can be able to achieve. Yeah.
In a bit, we'll be sampling some of your feedback in this conversation. But just before we cross over to my colleague Ayub on that, so we do not come to this negotiation table with clean hands as Africa. We also have a responsibility. That's essentially what you're saying.
Yes, everyone has a responsibility, and for African nations, we do not have to make mistakes, the same mistakes the world nations have made, for example, in developing unsustainably. But we also have to be alive to the reality of some of the technologies that we need to adapt sustainably are very expensive to us, and that's why some of these multilateral discussions like the COP27 is really important to ensure that we are able to access the technology that is required to adapt and to develop sustainably. And even taking this conversation further, we say that most of our African communities use non-clean energy sources, for example, firewood, not because that is what they want to do, but because a more cleaner technology is not accessible to them because it's too expensive. How can we make sure that these technologies are much more affordable to the person that actually needs it most?
All right, and we'll be coming back to continue this very important conversation. I like how Esther is putting it. Now it makes sense to some of you who may have thought that this is a conversation that is so high level and it is not supposed to be part and parcel. It is the little things that you do in your small corner of the world that could be changing, the environment around you. You have a responsibility in this whole climate change agenda. And I just want to cross over to Ayub. There's a lot that has been said on social media, of course, and we just want to sample some of your questions and your views in this climate change debate. Ayub, what do we have?
Of course, feedback from Kenyans who have tuned into this broadcast that is tackling the climate debate and the consequences of the drought in the country, stretching the capacity and the resources of the national government. That was what President William Ruto underscored, not only here in Kenya when he was last in Turkana County, in helping in the alleviation of the drought consequences on Kenyans affected by drought, but also the same message he conveyed to world leaders in the Egyptian port city of Sharm el-Sheikh, where world leaders are meeting for the COP27 climate conference, and the need for the coming together to reach a climate consensus and an agreement for that matter. Let's begin with the Twitter hashtag on Daybreak on Twitter at Citizen TV Kenya, and here's what's coming up. It says, Bob Owino Otieno says, even though flooding and drought are natural calamities, we are facing severe wrath of climate change because of human activities interfering with natural resources which can be used to mitigate the unfinished, he says, and talks about the consequences of drought in the country. Kipngeno head boy says the government should commit resources towards tree planting to increase our forest cover, protect our water towers, support reforestation and build capacity of departments involved in the environmental conservation. The same messaging by President William Ruto, who said the government, Kenya, will increase its forest cover as part of the measures in combating climate change. And Nico Maingi says climate adaptation is the only way out, as mitigation seems futile because the current and future generations want to meet their needs within a strained natural habitat. This was also part of the discussion that we had earlier in the morning with the ambassador of Denmark to Kenya, where he said as a development partner cooperating with the government, they are looking into adaptation and creating awareness because the world is changing and this need for the adaptation mechanisms around climate change and the consequences it does bear not only here in Kenya or Africa, but across the humanity. Oringe Waswa says the drought situation in the country should give us every reason to worry. It's time all the state departments adopted climate change policies in the mitigation of the situation we are facing as a country, and the clarion call therefore coming from this view and what appears to be the change in gear. Next up is Reme Butia. He says climate change won't wait. We arrived at fork in the road and we need to join together to act now. We can all contribute in small ways by reducing, he says, our personal carbon footprint to help mitigate the speed and effects of climate change. And this, of course, is part of also the calls that are continuously amplified by global leaders in the cutting down of emission. That is the global gas emission. Africa does contribute about 3.8%, but bears the consequence of the climate change, yet it isn't among the big polluters. I mean, what the Malawian president said, that if you look, richer countries don't pay up, we all perish together, and therefore this need for the consensus and the effect that it has had in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, and in North America. Gudi Barasawere says the climate debate should be accorded the seriousness it deserves. The drought we are witnessing at the moment in our country, says, is one of the harshest effects of climate change, hinting of a more worse situation ahead. It's time to act, and this is the action that is called for by the players who are meeting in the Egyptian port city of Sharm el-Sheikh 1 year after they all congregated in the Scottish city of Glasgow in search of an agreement that activists in terms of champions of environment have termed as purely aspirational, and it lacked teeth. Can therefore leaders meeting in Egypt, in Africa, reach a consensus on climate change and come up with a solution that will be meant to arrest the rising temperatures, which is now heading to 2.7 degrees, which is way beyond the pre-industrial levels. And it means then 1.7 billion people will be on the brink of starvation. 6 to 8% of hunger rise will be recorded across the world, and coastal cities across the world will be submerged because of rising water levels due to the increase in temperature. Safin, back to you.
Indeed, thank you, Ayub, for that. Very important issues being raised there by our viewers. Kipngeno Headboy talking about mitigation seems futile. Adaptation is the way to go. And of course, I cannot go through all of them, but key issues there being raised. I just want your quick response on that specific, feedback on, do we seem to be failing on mitigation? So let's go in the adaptation way. What if you weigh these two, options? Where do you put us?
Yeah, I think adaptation is a priority for Kenya, but at the same time, we have to strike a balance because we still need to ensure that the ecosystem services are restored. And I'll give you an example of what we've been doing in Kenya Red Cross. We've been doing both. We've been running a tree an environmental program that combines tree growing within different communities and in our schools. And part of what we have seen is that our volunteers and our youth have become very innovative in how they are tackling the issues of climate change. For example, in Kwale branch, we are seeing that our volunteers have been engaging in beach cleanups, where most of the waste, yes, is plastic, but they have also been collecting the coconut husks that have not been utilized before. But what we have seen is that they're using coconut husk to pot for tree seedlings, of which it is eliminating the need to use a polytube, which is a much less environmentally friendly material. So, and also looking at also across other counties where volunteers, for example, in Murang'a and Laikipia, are recycling plastic waste to irrigate and pot for vegetables, and also going to Tana River, where we are implementing a climate smart agriculture, which is actually supporting the farmers to adapt to the current climate impacts. So for me, and from where we sit, is a combination of both. We cannot say, oh, we will not do mitigation. There are places where we have opportunities to do actual mitigation of the adverse impacts of climate change, but there are communities that actually need support to adapt to the changing climate. So for me, I think it is a priority right now, given the scenarios and the context that we are in, to increase the adaptation measures. But we also do have to recognize opportunities where we can be able to implement mitigation measures as well.
All right, Esther. And now joining us from Egypt via Zoom is Dr. Mithika Mwenda. He's the Executive Director, Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. Daktari, good to see you, and thank you for creating time for us. We're having this conversation at a very crucial time. Just the other day, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in its 6th assessment report of 2022, cited 5 scenarios that estimate how global warming is going to affect the world, ranging from limiting the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius to the worst-case scenario that could rise as high as 4.4 degrees Celsius by the year 2100. Kindly, what do we need to do? Because clearly we must act now. What actions do we need to take? Daktari, if you can hear me? Daktari, if you can hear me, just unmute your mic and then you can just... All right. All right. We will be crossing over back to Dr. Mwenda in just a bit as we try to fix that technical hitch we are facing there. But of course, we are having a very pivotal conversation in studio. And Esther, you had just, touched a few, important initiatives that you have taken as a Red Cross to just sort of help us manage in this untimely, circumstances. And there's a lot that needs to be done then in terms of awareness, in terms of just helping the population to understand the significance of this information. What have you done in terms of the trainings, the packaging of this information for them to understand how it relates to them? Because for them to, before they can adopt anything, they have to understand it first. Yeah. What is being done in terms of that? Yeah,
absolutely. So part of what we have been doing is doing a lot of awareness and education within the communities where we are working, and also through our school programs. So Kenya Red Cross has a very unique structure, which is cut across the former 8 provincial regions and 47 counties branches, and also we have established chapters and school clubs within different institutions of learning and schools. So through these structures and through our volunteer base, which are actually based at the community level, we are able to take them through different education and awareness sessions. But the most important thing is, especially when it comes to breaking down the issues of jargons about climate change, is being able to actually take them through different trainings. For example, one of the things that we've been doing is a process called community managed disaster risk reduction, or risk assessment. And through that process, we usually work with communities to map out what are the climate risks risks, for example. What are the different disaster risks they are able to see within their community? And through that process, it is a very participatory process. We are able to come up with an action plan for 2 years, which includes the contribution of what the community can be able to do within their own resources, and what is it that they can be able to do with external support. So part of what we do is to actually do a lot of training around, for example, where we are working in Tana River, we do training on climate smart agriculture approaches. And through that process, we are able to identify and establish climate smart agriculture champions who can be able, again, to go back to the wider community and be able to enlighten more people within the community to adapt to the climate smart practices within their farming structure. Again, when we go to the schools, we work with the different stakeholders, including the Ministry of Education, to be able to understand how can we be able to break this information to a level that the schools can be able to understand, but also combining the education part with practical activities. We are working with schools to establish tree nurseries. So part of what we do is to bring expertise from Kenya Red Cross and also from, for example, different line ministries like KFS or the Ministry of Agriculture, who will walk with us this journey and also work with the schools to ensure that the students and the pupils have the knowledge and acquire the knowledge to actually set up tree nurseries and manage them, but also take care of the trees.
All right. I like, the constant message that has come out of this conversation has been the need for collaboration. The underlying factor is that everybody has a role to play. Every sector, every organization, every person has a role to play if we are all to succeed in this. And I don't know whether we, have Dr. Mithika Mwenda with us, just to Yes, all right. So just to quickly cross over to you, Daktari, thank you for joining us once again. And I just want to get your quick insights on what's going on in Egypt. I understand that Africa is coming to this, table with solutions, practical solutions. Tell us a bit about some of those and what you're looking at in terms of what can work for Africa and specifically Kenya.
Thank you very much. I hope you are getting...
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Thank you. So even before I come to the solutions you are talking about, I want to mention two things which Dr. Koimburi has said, and also I'm quite excited by the lady from the Red Cross. We here is really negotiations. And for us, as the civil society, we have seen this. Personally, I've attended the past 10 COPs. And what we see here is really what I can refer to the game, endless game of musical chairs. Every time we come and make decisions, and we go back to our countries, wait for another COP. We go there, wait for another one. And that's why when we were coming here, everyone was talking about an implementation COP. That can we focus on the decisions which we have already done and implement them, including what we are calling $100 billion per year, which we have never seen, if Koimburi can agree with me. And so what we are calling as the people, representing the people, is really for our governments to ensure an open, transparent, and accountable dialogue here based on what we are calling empirical evidence. You are talking about $100 billion. Can you tell us where they were delivered? Can you tell us what they did? So that is very important. And what we are seeing is really that judicious guarding on individual country interest, like in the UK, the case of UK, we are celebrating a lot of money. Our president signed $500 billion. And we wonder, where is that money? You go back and realize that Rishi Sunak, the UK Prime Minister, in fact, for us, inducted the Kenyan president. that we have signed billion, and I saw people really celebrating. And you ask, where is this money? The Grand Falls Dam, it was actually a project which is existing now, started in 2000. All the other projects and everything which they are talking about there are things which exist. We say climate finance money and climate change money should be new and additional to the existing projects, to the ODA and what have you. What I could be happy about, and my sister there at the studio from Red Cross, every day they are counting carcasses and carcasses of animals. People, millions of people in the Horn of Africa and Kenya are sleeping hungry. When we were coming here, we were expecting the global community to respond to that and tell us that we have delivered this to help these people. And that is what we are calling loss and damage. These people are suffering. How much money do we contribute? Did you see Rishi Sunak signing billions of dollars, Kenya shillings, to deliver on the Horn of Africa famine? No, it is about business. So they have turned these negotiations into business opportunities to come sign big deals, and that is acceptable, and those are not the principles with which we founded the Climate Change Convention, Paris Agreement, and others. We have lost in the direction, and I would urge our negotiators to really manage their expectations. We may not be expecting anything, and for loss and damage, we need really to be very cautious. It is not a win so far. We are yet to celebrate, because even if we agree on anything, it is going to be something which is going to take 2 years even to operationalize by 2024.
To be having a contrary opinion, many thought this was a win, but just to have it on the agenda, the loss and damage is actually a step, just to start that conversation. But like you rightfully put it, it may take time for it to be implemented. You asked a very critical question earlier, where is the money? And I want to ask you that same question in a different way. I mean, there is money that has been allocated to developing countries, over the years, but how much of that have we invested in, climate change adaptation measures and, just building resilience? How much have we invested in that? What is our progress in terms of how much we have utilized the money that we have received so far, in as much as it may not be enough?
So,
Tari?
Are you hearing me?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. The problem, and this is another challenge which we have, is that we talk about big money in the adaptation or mitigation. Any agreement, Paris Agreement included, and our nationally determined contributions are actually framed to support mitigation. They are more mitigation-centric than really adaptation. Adaptation, in view of investment, has no return for investment. And no one, including the donors, who are even interested in investing in it. Because the example of the deal which have been signed here, they are signing about energy projects. These are investment in solar, in wind power, in geothermal, and those others. Why are they doing it in agriculture and those others, which is more adaptation? So adaptation has been stopped, and our demands here is to have 50-50 share of support, finance of adaptation and mitigation. But I can assure you that as we fight for a new global goal for adaptation, it is going to be actually a task for us, because the industrialized countries have seen this is an opportunity for investment, big money recouping from our investment, and they are not interested with the livelihoods of. And then now that's why I come to you. What solutions do we have as an Africans? Because we are not going to rely on them. We are doing what we can. Somebody somewhere has caused this problem, and he is coming and starting helping us to cry And he's even crying more and telling us we are together, we are equal, and let us face this challenge together. I think hypocrisy by international community, and mark you, if you read President Ruto's statement, it is really very radical. As the chair of Committee of Heads of States and Governments on Climate Change, I would call upon him to just reflect on 2009, when and that is the reawakening we are seeing, when the late Meles Zenawi, the former prime minister of Ethiopia, we were very firm as Africans. I think we have softened our stance, because what has been happening is that the industrialized countries has used the tactics of manipulation, traveling to our countries, and then if that is not enough, even intimidating them, and then minimize this, downgrading the negotiations in such a way that we come to Egypt, we are not coming to negotiate, we are coming to cut deals. That is where we have lost it, and we do not have a very strong African position, because they have diverted that attention. The climate crisis is something which has not been caused by the African continent, and what we need to do is very strong commitment from industrialized countries, those who have caused the problem, as we do what we can, and we are doing it, but we cannot surmount the challenge, because it's so enormous that even if we put all our budget, we are not going to be able to surmount it. It has been caused by the other people who have refused to pay for it.
Thank you, Daktari. Just a final comment from you as we close this conversation. You said that this is a different COP. We've had several COPs before. The COP27 is seen as the implementation COP. How then do we move from the targets that we have set to practically implementing the commitments that are going to come forth from that particular conference? Just to come again, my question for you was that how do we move from setting those ambitious targets to practically implementing them? What will work?
Yeah, that is our desire, our aspirations as Africa, our priority as Africa. We are united with our governments. This is something which unites us, that we have talked so much for 30 years. We need action. And we need quantifiable actions. You have told us that you are delivering $100 billion US. We want to really empirical evidence on where that money is. But of course, we know this. We are facing this crisis when we are also confronting other crises, the COVID-19 crisis. Now all the focus now is by industrialized countries is on the Ukraine-Russian war and those others. Of course, we acknowledge that. The only thing we have to understand and acknowledge is science and climate justice. The IPCC report just recently is talking about now we have overshot the tipping point. And while that is happening, you can see the impacts. Now, the issue of climate change is not an issue of tomorrow. Even where it never used to happen, where I come from, Meru, now my mother is experiencing it. We cannot plant our crops. Look, and it is not even a problem for Africa, Europe, China. So I think we have to be very bold, and bold actions are required. We need substantial amount of money to do that, but we need that trust building. We need honesty by industrialized countries. We need transparency, because they have made a lot of commitments which are never fulfilled.
Asante. Thank you, Daktari. Sorry to cut you short. We are running out of time for this conversation, but we really appreciate you creating time for us this morning. Of course, it's a conversation that will continue. We'll create another platform to pick it up from where we are leaving it at. And in studio, I've been hosting Esther Mwiruri, a program officer, climate change and adaptation. Esther, I'll also give you a chance for your final remarks.
Yeah, sorry. I think for me is we are in the process of reviewing our national climate change action plan, and also the counties are also in the process of reviewing their reviewing their county integrated development plans. And I think climate action should really be a key priority for all these plans, so that we can be able to allocate adequate resources to adaptation and different actions that we have committed towards. So I think we're beyond the COP expectations. Here at home, those are some of the avenues that we should start looking at, and also ensuring that from our individual ways we are able to reduce the carbon footprint and start adopting to a more sustainable way of life.
All right, thank you so much, Esther. And also earlier we were discussing this with Dr. Kinyanjui Koimburi, an agriculture and climate change expert, also coming to us live via Zoom from Egypt. Dr. Mithika Mwenda, the Executive Director, Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, also in Egypt. And we were bringing the conversation happening at Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, right here in studio, for it to make sense for you. And that is how we wrap it up right here on Daybreak. But before that, I want to cross over quickly to my colleague Ayub Abdikadir. A lot has been said on social media. Ayub?
Well, Safin, some feedback coming through the hashtag Daybreak on Twitter at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir at Safin_Cheng. And Evans Wanyela says, whatever is being discussed at the COP27 climate conference should be taken seriously and implemented. Let's not just be discussing without implementing. And this is, of course, the call that is also amplified across the world. Simon Sawe says, we will discuss climate change, but we don't take it serious. We'll keep doing things the same way, or even worse. We'll make one step forward and take two steps backwards. The government must lead the way and be serious about the problem. And Isaac Onenga says, President is doing great facts to this economy, talking of the address by President William Ruto. He, of course, spoke yesterday and the day before at the plenary during the COP27 climate conference in Egypt, set to end in under 13 days' time. Engineer Lazaro says they should now walk the talk by reducing environment pollution. He means the richer countries from their industries, while Africans should work closely with the environment conserves to stop the population from forest degradation. Subject, of course, the climate conference that's ongoing at the moment, and the need to increase forest cover in the country also underscored, and its importance spoken to by the president. And we have a responsibility on climate action, says Kipingeno Headboy. Nobody should come and reward the incentive from anyone. We must understand that we will bear the consequences of our actions or inaction, or the inability to act because of climate change, since the effect is too huge. And the last one here says the big polluters should now walk the talk, and the commitment to financial resources is therefore very key, and they should work closely with the countries that have been impacted hugely. And this is part of the conversation ongoing in the Egyptian city of Sharm el-Sheikh. The wholesale effect climate change is having in terms of heat wave in Europe, the flooding in Pakistan and parts of Asia, the hunger in Africa because of the drought crisis and the consequences it bears on the millions of Africans affected, and also the typhoons and the consequences recorded in parts of Latin America and in North America. And here we come to a close on Daybreak. Many thanks for waking up with us here on the broadcast. I am Ayub Abdikadir Abdi. Your company is always cherished.
Indeed, and I am Safin Acheng Oma. It's been a pleasure doing this for you. Do join us again for yet another version of Daybreak right here on Citizen Television. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your viewing.